Jimin finally confronted Jungkook publicly. The truth he spilled was heartbreaking. You lied to me for 6 years. And you smiled through it like nothing was breaking. Jimin's voice cracked, raw and thunderous, echoing through the stadium as a stunned silence fell over thousands. The air was electric, thick with tension, disbelief, and something else entirely: heartbreak. The flashing stage lights seemed to dim under the weight of his words. Jungkook stood frozen under the unforgiving spotlight, his mic limp in his hand, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might shatter. It was supposed to be a celebratory reunion, 7 members standing together again under one roof, one stage, one last time. Fans screamed, lights waved like stars, and everything was meant to be perfect. Until Jimin turned around, until he turned toward Jungkook, the cameras were still rolling. Live, broadcasting worldwide. "I begged you," Jimin continued, voice trembling but sharp as broken glass. "I told you I couldn't handle another lie, but you chose her. Again, over me, over us." A ripple of gasps cut through the crowd. Jungkook didn't speak. He didn't move. His eyes, dark and wide, were drowning in something unspoken, guilt or fury or fear. Maybe all three. The silence between them roared louder than any chorus ever could. Jimin's chest heaved as if each breath was a war against himself. His hands trembled slightly, habitually reaching for the silver ring he always wore, spinning it like a talisman, a nervous tic he never quite grew out of. The ring glinted under the spotlight. A gift from Jungkook, 6 years. 6 years of late-night calls, of shared rooms and hidden looks, and the quiet promise that no matter what happened out there, they had each other. Until they didn't. "Do you even remember what you said to me in Tokyo?" Jimin's eyes were blazing now. "You said you'd never leave. You said I was the only person who saw the real you, that you were tired of pretending." The crowd was still, millions watching from home. The hashtag Jimin and Jungkook was already trending. But the moment wasn't about the audience anymore. It was about 2 people in freefall finally crashing. Jungkook opened his mouth, but his voice faltered. "I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" Jimin spat. "From the truth." It was chaos cloaked in calm. A storm dressed as a song. And still, Jungkook didn't run. Instead, he took a slow step forward, mic rising like it weighed more than the past decade. His voice, when it finally broke through the silence, was hoarse, fractured. "I was scared," he said. "Of what loving you out loud would do to you, to us, to everything we built. I thought I could live with the silence." Jimin's expression twisted, grief, rage, and disbelief flickering all at once. "You couldn't," Jungkook whispered. "And now neither can I." The floodlights bathed them both in an unforgiving white, like an autopsy table. Nothing left to hide, nothing left unbroken. "You think this is about going public?" Jimin shook his head slowly, bitterly. "This is about trust. About the nights I cried alone while you were somewhere else pretending I didn't exist. This is about how I kept loving you even when you stopped looking at me like I mattered." A single tear slipped down his cheek, unnoticed by him but caught by every camera. And that was the moment the crowd realized this wasn't fan service. This wasn't a performance. This was the unraveling. The truth had been a wound hidden behind smiles, hand-holding, and polished PR statements. But now, here it was, bleeding out under stage lights. Love, betrayal, silence, and sacrifice, laid bare. They had built a kingdom of songs, memories, and perfect moments. But it turned out the most unforgettable note was the one never sung, and it was heartbreak. Backstage, the silence was unbearable, heavier than applause, heavier than memory. Jimin stormed through the corridor, his breath ragged, heart pounding like war drums. His clenched fists shook at his sides, and the heat of humiliation still burned under his skin. Every step echoed, mocking him. Behind him, the chaos unfolded. Staff members scrambling, managers arguing in hushed tones, phones buzzing like wasps. The broadcast team had cut to black, but not before millions had seen it. The confrontation, the confessions, the collapse. He didn't care about the world watching. He cared about the one person who hadn't followed him. "Don't," Jimin snapped when Namjoon tried to grab his arm. "Don't you dare say this was unprofessional." Namjoon, always the mediator, hesitated. "That's not what I was going to say." "Then say what you mean, Taehyung." Jimin turned, eyes blazing. "Say it." Namjoon sighed, rubbing his temple. "You've been holding that in for years." "And now it's out," Jimin's voice broke. "So what now?" "You just burned the bridge in front of millions." Jimin laughed, bitter and hollow. "The bridge was already ashes. I just stopped pretending it was. Behind them, the door creaked. Jungkook. He looked like he hadn't breathed since the stage. His hoodie was half-zipped, his black hair damp at the edges with sweat or maybe nerves. His eyes locked on Jimin like a lifeline, and Jimin's heart betrayed him by skipping. But he didn't move. Neither did Jungkook. You should have come after me 6 years ago, Jimin said quietly, stepping closer. You should have said something when I begged you not to disappear. I was 22, Jungkook replied, voice gravel and regret. I didn't know how to be anything but afraid. You knew how to lie. That hit like a punch. Jungkook flinched. I didn't lie, he said. I hid. From the world, from myself. I thought I could protect what we had by not nomming it. You thought you could love me in the dark and I'd just stay, Jimin said, eyes glistening. Like a secret you could bury until it stopped breathing. Jungkook's voice cracked. I never stopped loving you. Then why does it feel like I was the only one bleeding? The tension was unbearable. Yoongi, standing near the wall with arms crossed, finally broke the silence. You two need to finish this somewhere else, he muttered. This is about to become everyone's war. Jimin turned defiant. It already is. And that was the problem. The headlines were already multiplying. Jimin breaks down on stage. BTS imploding. Jungkook's secret romance revealed. The fans were split, some heartbroken, some furious, some refusing to believe it was real. But it was. Too real. That night, the dorm was a battlefield of silence. Jimin didn't go to his room. He sat in the kitchen with a bottle of soju he hadn't touched in 2 years, eyes locked on the dim fridge light, like answers might flicker into view. The door creaked again. Jungkook. Jimin didn't look up. Don't. I will, Jungkook said. I'm done hiding. You should have been done before you let me rot alone in that hotel room. The words hung between them. Tokyo. The night it all began to die. Jungkook sat across from him, voice quiet. I wrote you letters. Jimin scoffed. I don't want poetry, I wanted you. I was going to leave the group, Jungkook said suddenly. Back then, after we came back from tour, I was going to walk away, tell the truth, be with you. Jimin froze. But I didn't, Jungkook whispered. Because I knew what it would cost us. Our careers, you, the fans. I thought if I just held on just a little longer, we could survive. Quietly. Jimin finally looked at him. So I was a secret worth sacrificing everything for, except your career. I thought I was doing the right thing, Jungkook said, his voice breaking. But I was just scared. You keep saying that. Jimin leaned in, eyes sharp. You want to know what I was scared of? I was scared I'd spend my life next to someone who looked at me like I was home in private but a stranger in public. Jungkook swallowed hard. Then let me fix it. You can't, Jimin said, standing. You should have tried before the world found out. And then, like fate mocking them, Taehyung's voice echoed from the hallway. They didn't just find out. He stepped into view, face pale. Someone leaked it, the footage. What? Jungkook stood. What footage? The Tokyo hotel, the night you two, Taehyung stopped himself. It was recorded, someone been sitting on it, waiting. Jimin's blood ran cold. You're saying they knew. Someone did, Taehyung said, and now they're coming for you both. The air turned ice. The confrontation had only been the beginning. The truth was afire, and now someone was throwing gasoline. Jimin looked at Jungkook, and for the first time there was no fury in his eyes, just fear. Real fear. Who? Jungkook asked, barely breathing. But no one had the answer. And somewhere in a cold room filled with monitors and data, the footage flickered on a screen again. Someone had been waiting, watching. And they were just getting started. The video started with laughter. Soft, intimate, a stolen moment between two shadows in a Tokyo hotel room. The camera angle was off-center, shaky, covert, but the audio was clear, too clear. You're my favorite mistake, Jimin whispered in the clip, his voice tinged with tired affection, his fingers gently tracing Jungkook's jawline. Jungkook leaned into the touch like it was oxygen. The feed cut there. just a glimpse, enough to ignite a wildfire. By morning, it was everywhere. Phones buzzed like sirens. Headlines screamed betrayal. Opinion pieces flooded the web, speculation, praise, fury. Some called it brave, some called it a scandal, some called it the fall of an empire. Jimin sat alone in the practice room, hoodie pulled over his head, eyes red from a night without sleep. His phone was off. He couldn't bear to see it. Not the messages, not the trending hashtags, not the betrayal dissected and analyzed like he was a character on a show, not a man whose entire life was unraveling. The door slammed open. "Did you know?" Jimin's voice was sharp, rising before he even saw the face. "Did you fucking know, Taehyung?" Taehyung flinched. "No, I swear, I didn't even." "But you heard about it." Jimin stood, stepping forward. "You knew something existed and you didn't say a word." "I thought it was a bluff," Taehyung said, voice trembling. "Rumors fly all the time. I didn't want to bring it up unless it was real." "It was real. It is real. My life is in flames and now the whole world gets to watch it burn on loop." The door creaked again. Jungkook entered, face pale, hands shaking, a stack of printouts in his grip. "Don't," Jimin warned, not even turning to look at him. "Don't walk in here with excuses." "I'm not," Jungkook said quietly. "I'm walking in with a name." Jimin turned. Jungkook laid the papers down. "There's metadata on the original file," he said. "Taehyung helped me trace it." "Trace it to what?" Jungkook looked up, his eyes dark. "Our manager, Seokjin. The room went still. "No," Jimin said. "That's impossible. Jin wouldn't. He loved us. He protected us." "He protected the group," Jungkook said bitterly. "Not us. He kept things clean, controlled, profitable. But we stopped being safe the moment we stopped being silent." Jimin stared at the evidence. Timestamps, IP addresses, a decrypted folder marked insurance. Taehyung backed away, like the truth might explode if he stood too close. "He had it all along," Jungkook whispered. "Since Tokyo, maybe longer. He must have found the recording, maybe the hotel's security system was hacked. I don't know, but he kept it. And now that the group's almost done, he leaked it." "But why?" Jimin's voice cracked. "To destroy us." "To control the narrative," Jungkook said. "To remind us who really owns the story." The door slammed again, this time harder. Hosok. "Get your shit together," he snapped. "All of you. You think the media storm is bad. Wait until Jin walks into the press conference he just scheduled without consulting us." "What?" Jimin blinked. 3 hours from now. HYBE headquarters. Jin's going live. Jungkook's fist clenched. "To spin it." "Worse," Hosok said. "To bury it." Jimin was already moving. "We're going." "Like hell we are," Taehyung said. "They'll chew us alive." "Let them," Jimin's voice was steel. "Let them see what they made." By the time they arrived at the headquarters, the press was already swarming. Cameras, journalists, fans behind barricades, screaming names like prayers or curses. The building loomed above them, a monolith of power, cold and towering. Inside, Jin was already at the podium. Clean suit, polished smile, the perfect lie. Jimin burst through the side doors without hesitation, Jungkook at his heels. Flashbulbs exploded like gunshots. Gasps rippled through the crowd. "Stop lying," Jimin shouted before Jin could speak again. "Stop using us." Jin's smile didn't falter. "Jimin, please." "No," Jimin stepped onto the stage. "You want a narrative, I'll give you one." Jungkook stepped beside him. His mic was live. "You held on to that footage like a weapon," he said. "We trusted you, and you turned our love into leverage." Jin's mask cracked. "You're emotional, this isn't the place." "It's the only place," Jimin said, voice steady now. "Because the truth doesn't need PR, it needs air." The room was chaos. But they didn't run. Not this time. Jimin looked into the sea of cameras, into millions of watching eyes, and spoke what he never thought he'd be allowed to. "Yes, I loved him. I still do. And if that ruins your version of who we were, maybe you never really saw us at all." Jungkook didn't hesitate. I loved him too. I still do. And I won't apologize for surviving the silence any longer. Reporters shouted over one another. Jin was pale now. The staff buzzed, panicked. But none of that mattered. In the middle of it all, Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand. And Jungkook took it. For the first time, in the light. Outside, the world screamed. But inside, for the briefest moment, there was peace. Until a phone rang backstage. Taehyung picked it up. His expression drained of color. He walked out slowly, eyes wide, voice shaking as he whispered the words none of them expected. There's more footage. And it wasn't just Tokyo. You're joking, Jimin said, his voice flat, eyes locked on Taehyung like the words might change if he stared hard enough. I wish I was, Taehyung said, still holding the phone, screen dimming against his trembling hand. It's not just Tokyo, it's multiple cities, years. Years, Jungkook echoed, a chill creeping into his voice. Taehyung nodded slowly. Busan, New York, Paris. Anywhere you two shared a room or slipped away, someone was watching. Jimin staggered back a step like the floor had shifted beneath him. No, he muttered. No, that's not possible. But it was. The HYBE building had gone into full lockdown. Security ushered reporters out. The press conference was over, yet the storm outside only swelled. Like the truth had summoned a hurricane no one could put back in a bottle. Jungkook's fists were clenched, so tight his nails left crescent moons in his palms. Who the hell does that? He hissed. Who records someone for years without their knowledge? Who stores that? Taehyung didn't answer. Hoseok did. Someone who was preparing for the endgame. They turned to him. Hoseok stood at the back of the room, his jaw tight, his posture rigid. He stepped forward, holding a USB drive he hadn't shown anyone before now. This arrived at my apartment last night, he said. No return address, just one word on the envelope. What word? Jimin asked. Insurance. Jungkook grabbed the drive. What's on it? Clips, Hoseok said. Dozens, some of them blurred, incomplete, but some are crystal clear. Jimin was already walking to the nearest laptop. His hands shook as he plugged it in. A folder opened. A list of files appeared. Each was dated, each location marked, like someone had been documenting their relationship as if it were a case file. He clicked one at random. The screen lit up. It was Seoul, their old dorm. The footage was grainy, static-lined, but unmistakably real. Jimin curled against Jungkook in the dark, their voices low. Promise me you won't leave, Jimin whispered. I won't, Jungkook had said in the video, even if the world burns. The real Jimin in the room turned away, his face unreadable. He was silent, but tears clung to his lashes like frost. This is sick, Jungkook spat. This is beyond invasion, this is criminal. Namjoon finally entered the room, having heard the chaos from outside. Then we treat it like a crime. Namjoon. No, he cut in. I'm done with protecting a system that chews up the people inside it. We go public, all the way, no more PR masks, no more damage control. We press charges, we release a statement, we end this on our terms. But it could destroy everything, Hoseok warned. The company, our legacy, what we built. What we built was real, Jimin interrupted. And if it falls apart because the truth came out, then maybe it was never strong enough to stand anyway. Taehyung sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. We're going to lose fans. We're going to lose trust. Jungkook looked at him, his voice low but fierce. Then let them see us, not idols, not perfect, just us. The silence that followed was thick, heavy with choice. Jimin stood. Then we tell them everything, from the beginning. Namjoon nodded. And we file charges against anyone who knew. We'll need legal help, Hoseok said. Real ones, not company-appointed lapdogs. I know someone, Jimin said. She helped me once back when things were bad. He didn't elaborate. He didn't have to. The past lingered like smoke. The fights. The nights they didn't speak. The therapy sessions Jimin went to alone, while Jungkook stayed silent in another city. Outside, rain began to fall. The kind that blurred the city lights and made everything feel cinematic, like tragedy had become beautiful. But inside that room, it was raw and real. Jungkook stepped beside Jimin. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." Jimin didn't look at him. "I've never had a choice." Jungkook flinched like he'd been slapped. "I'm trying to make things right," he said, voice hoarse. "And I'm trying not to hate you for being too late," Jimin snapped, eyes glassy. "But it's hard." "Then let me fight for you now." Jimin looked at him then, really looked. There was pain in his eyes, and love, and something more dangerous than both, hope. "Fine," he said. "Let's burn this down together." They met the lawyer that night in a quiet cafe far from the city center. She was older, sharp-eyed, calm. She listened without flinching. She nodded through the files, the videos, the names. "You understand what happens if we go public?" she asked. "The lawsuits, the interviews, the corporations that will come for your throats." "Yes," Jimin said. "And you're willing to put your careers on the line?" Jungkook met her gaze. "We're putting our truth on the line." She nodded. "Then let's make some noise." The next morning, the official lawsuit was filed. Charges: illegal surveillance, invasion of privacy, coercion, emotional abuse, and corporate exploitation. HYBE released a statement within hours, flat, corporate, full of denials. But the internet had already turned, not against Jimin and Jungkook, against the system. The hashtag changed. From Jimin and Jungkook exposed to protect the truth. Fans dug deeper, old clips resurfaced. Patterns, clues, stories. They had always known something was hidden behind the gloss. Now the curtain was gone. But the cost was coming. And as Jimin looked out the window of the van, watching the clouds shift over Seoul like bruises, he whispered to no one in particular. "Let them come." And somewhere, deep in the shadows of the industry, someone watched the broadcast with a tight-lipped smile and whispered back. "They already have." The walls of the HYBE building gleamed like nothing was wrong. Beneath the polished glass and corporate branding, lawyers filled conference rooms like vultures. PR teams pulled emergency all-nighters. Screens flashed red alerts. Executives whispered behind locked doors. The empire was bleeding, and they were stitching up wounds with press releases. But Jimin and Jungkook didn't hide anymore. They walked into the studio together that morning, heads high, hand in hand, ignoring the stares that followed them like ghosts down the hallway. Jimin's face was unreadable. Jungkook was carved from stone. The air around them buzzed with tension, sharp and brittle. In the studio, Namjoon was already waiting, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the monitor playing one of the leaked clips on mute. It was them in Paris 2 years ago. Jimin asleep on the couch, Jungkook leaning over to kiss his forehead. Simple, tender, weaponized. "They kept this," Namjoon said, not turning around. "Someone watched this and still thought it was leverage." Jimin's jaw clenched. "That's because they don't see us. They see assets." Taehyung sat in the corner, scrolling through fan responses on his phone. "It's a bloodbath out there," he muttered. "Some people are fighting for you like it's a revolution. Others are praying for your exile." Jungkook nodded slowly. "Let them pray, we're still here." Suddenly, the studio door opened. Min Yoongi walked in. He hadn't shown up since the confrontation went public. His absence had been a wound, silent and aching. But now, he stood with a tablet in hand, face pale and furious. "I have something," he said simply. Everyone turned. Yoongi tapped the tablet, opened a hidden folder. "Someone contacted me anonymously, said they used to work for the surveillance firm HYBE contracted years ago. Security audits, they said. Private data collection was part of the job, but it went beyond that." He pulled up an image. A spreadsheet, names, locations, timestamps. "Not just you," Yoongi said. "All of us, every member, every city, every flight, every room." Jimin stepped closer. His breath hitched. There it was, Seoul, Tokyo, Manila, LA, rows and rows of data. Private phone calls recorded. Late-night arguments noted. Medical records accessed. "This is disgusting," Jungkook muttered. They treated us like property. Taehyung's voice was barely a whisper. Like products. Namjoon finally snapped. We need to expose all of this. Not just the footage, everything. We have to burn the whole machine down. Jimin's voice was low, haunted. What if the machine fights back harder? Yoongi met his gaze. Then we bleed louder. That night, they uploaded the files. All of them. No filters, no edits, no PR team. Just raw, unfiltered truth dumped into the world like a flood through a broken dam. Fans screamed online. Some cried, some panicked. Some refused to believe the truth, clutching to their illusion of perfection like lifelines. But others rose. They created hashtags, wrote op-eds, launched petitions. Former staffers began coming forward anonymously. Dancers, stylists, interns. The story grew teeth. What began as a personal love story had become a rebellion. And then the letters started arriving. Not fan mail. Not support. Legal threats. Dozens of them. Cease and desist orders, defamation suits, corporate injunctions, threats against families. One letter accused Jimin of malicious sabotage with intent to dismantle company structure. Another warned Jungkook of permanent contract violation punishable by litigation exceeding $10 million. They sat in the living room that night, letters scattered across the coffee table like knives. I knew they'd fight, Jimin whispered. I didn't think they'd try to erase me. Jungkook reached for him. They can't erase what's real. Can't they? Jimin whispered. If they take everything, who are we? You're mine, Jungkook said, fierce and aching. Even if they take the music, the fame, the fans, you're still mine. Jimin's eyes filled with tears. Then fight with me, no matter how ugly this gets. Until my last breath. The next day, an emergency board meeting was leaked to the press. A secret recording. Jin's voice, cold and calculating. They think they're in control. Let them bleed. The public forgets, they always do. And then, a new voice. Unmistakable. Another executive. We still have the footage they don't know about. The internet exploded. People demanded answers. Protests formed outside HYBE. Streaming services crashed from sudden boycotts. Major sponsors began pulling out. And then the call came. From a number no one expected. Jimin answered it with a trembling hand. Hello. The voice on the other end was female, soft, chillingly calm. You're not safe, she said. They're going to use the footage from the hospital next. Jimin's breath caught. What hospital? You know which one, she said. They kept the footage from that night. Jimin's world went silent. That night. The overdose. The night no one but Jungkook knew about. The night he almost didn't wake up. The line went dead. And in that moment, Jimin realized this wasn't just about truth anymore. This was war. Jimin didn't speak for a full minute after the call ended. The phone slipped from his hand and landed on the hardwood floor with a dull thud, vibrating once before falling still. Jungkook was at his side in an instant, his voice low but frantic. What is it? What happened? Jimin blinked, lips parted, throat dry. His heartbeat pounded in his ears like a war drum, louder than words, louder than thought. They recorded the hospital, he finally whispered. Jungkook paled. No, that's not possible. It wasn't supposed to be. Jimin's voice cracked as the truth clawed its way out. That place was private, off the books. No names, no press, no cameras, just a bed, just me, and almost not even that. Jungkook sank onto the couch like gravity had doubled. That night, he said, barely audible, I sat outside your room for 7 hours. They wouldn't let me in. You were unconscious. And when I asked, begged for the footage from the security cameras to know what happened, they said it didn't exist. Jimin laughed, bitter and raw. They lied. Taehyung stood in the doorway, eyes wide, having caught the last part of the conversation. Are you saying they filmed that? Your overdose. Jimin closed his eyes. Not just filmed, They kept it, and now they're going to use it. Yoongi's voice came from behind them, sharp and cold. Then we go nuclear. No, Jimin snapped his head up. If that footage gets out, it's not just a scandal. It's my worst moment, my lowest moment. I don't want the world to see me like that, vulnerable, dying. But if they're threatening to use it, Namjoon started. They'll weaponize my pain, Jimin said, his voice shaking. Turn it into a cautionary tale, a smear campaign. Mentally unstable idol breaks down under pressure, turns on company out of delusion. They'll twist it, bury the truth, and make me look insane. They won't get the chance, Jungkook growled. Jimin turned to him. You don't understand. I barely made it through that night. If I see that footage, if I have to live it again. You won't be alone this time, Jungkook interrupted, eyes blazing. Not again. The room fell into silence, heavy and suffocating. Yoongi took a step forward. We have to get ahead of it. If they have that video, we expose it ourselves. No, Jimin whispered. You don't have a choice, Namjoon said softly. They've made sure of that. Jimin stood slowly, walking to the window. Rain lashed against the glass as if the sky itself was protesting. He pressed his palm against the cold pane, remembering the white hospital room, the beeping machines, the silence that stretched too long. The shame. I took pills because I couldn't take the silence anymore, he said finally. The secrecy, the hiding, the pretending. I thought if I could sleep long enough, the ache would stop. But it never did. I woke up, and it was still there. Behind him, no one spoke. He turned. So if they want to use that night against me, he said, voice rising with steel, then I'll use it first. On my terms, I'll tell the world what happened, why I did it, who left me alone, and who held my hand when I woke up. Jungkook met his gaze, eyes shimmering. I would do it again, 1,000 times. Jimin's voice broke. You shouldn't have had to. They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they gathered everything, medical files, receipts, personal letters, even voicemails. They reconstructed the timeline down to the hour. The night Jimin disappeared, the emergency call Jungkook made, the security footage that was supposedly wiped, the lies told by HYBE's internal crisis team, the media blackout. It was a case file soaked in pain. They recorded the video the next day. Jimin sat alone, no makeup, no stylists, just a chair, a camera, and the truth. He looked directly into the lens. My name is Park Jimin, he began, and what you're about to hear is not a story about fame or music, it's about survival. He told everything. The anxiety, the insomnia, the years of suppression, the love he wasn't allowed to have, the betrayal of being watched, the pills, the floor, the cold, the lights that went out and the face he saw when they flickered back on. Jungkook. He didn't cry. He told it calmly, steadily, like a confession and a liberation. And when he finished, he said one final thing. I'm not ashamed of surviving, but you should be ashamed for making me feel like I should be. They uploaded it. Within 2 hours, the world cracked open. Fans wept. News anchors fumbled over their scripts. Mental health organizations issued statements of support. Other idols, ones who had remained silent, began posting black squares with simple captions. We hear you. We stand with you. But then came the retaliation. HYBE called it a mischaracterization. They denied the surveillance, denied the coercion, denied the footage. They painted Jimin as unwell and Jungkook as manipulated. Then the footage leaked. Grainy, cold, stark. A hospital hallway, a limp figure wheeled into a room, monitors screaming, staff shouting, and then a shadow packing outside, banging on the door, screaming Jimin's name. Jungkook. The world watched in stunned silence. And when the video ended, a new wave of fury swept across the globe. The story was no longer about a breakup or a betrayal. It was about control, about ownership of lives, bodies, identities. And the war was no longer just theirs. It belonged to everyone now. Back in the apartment, Jimin turned off the screen. He sat in silence for a moment, then looked at Jungkook. They tried to erase me. Jungkook took his hand, and instead you started a revolution. And in that silence, where shame once lived, something new was growing. Power. The rain hadn't stopped in days. Seoul was wrapped in a soft, gray melancholy, as if the sky itself were grieving or holding its breath. The streets were lined with posters half-soaked, headlines still screaming about lawsuits, betrayals, and the industry's collapse. But inside the small rooftop apartment where Jimin and Jungkook had once hidden from the world, there was no grief. There was only peace. They sat on the floor, backs against the wall, fingers intertwined. Around them, boxes lay half-packed, not from fear, not from defeat, but because they were leaving the city behind. Jimin leaned his head on Jungkook's shoulder. "Do you think it's over?" Jungkook took a long breath. "No." He turned to face him. "But I think we've finally begun." The lawsuits dragged on. HYBE's stocks plummeted. Former employees came forward in droves. Anonymous sources became named witnesses. Files were leaked. Executives resigned. Contracts were exposed. But Jimin and Jungkook had already stepped away. They no longer needed a stage. The world had become one. In their final public appearance, unannounced, unfiltered, they performed one last time. A rooftop concert, streamed live, just the two of them. No backup dancers. No pyrotechnics. Just voices and guitar and the ache of truth in every lyric. Jimin sang like he had nothing left to lose. Jungkook looked at him like he was the last song he'd ever hear. And when the final note faded into silence, Jimin spoke into the mic, not to the crowd, but to the sky. To anyone who ever felt silenced, sing anyway. The comments exploded, a million voices all at once, crying, cheering, thanking, healing. They turned off the camera. And for the first time, they weren't performers anymore. They were just two people who had survived. Weeks passed, then months. The chaos faded, replaced by quiet. The headlines moved on. The world spun forward, but the echoes of what they had done remained. A change had begun, quiet at first, then louder. Other artists started speaking up. Contracts were questioned. Mental health became mandatory policy. Surveillance within labels was investigated. The system that once fed on silence began to fracture. Jimin kept writing, not for charts but for healing. Jungkook taught music in secret, to kids who never thought they'd be heard. They traveled, they lived quietly, they laughed loudly. And one autumn morning, while sitting beside a lake wrapped in mist, Jimin turned to Jungkook and said, "You were right." "About what?" "The silence, it didn't kill me." Jungkook smiled. "No, you killed it." Jimin smiled back, eyes bright, voice soft. Together, they stayed there for a while, watching the wind stir the water like a lullaby. There was no stage, no cameras, no screaming crowds. Just the sound of their breathing, in harmony. The final note wasn't loud. It was honest. And that made it the most powerful one of all.